They're weaponizing housing assistance like it's a nuclear option, but here's what they forgot. Black Americans have survived worse with less, and 1 million out of 43 million means we're not as vulnerable as they think. November just became a whole lot more complicated for 2.4 million American households. Section 8 payments, the housing choice voucher program that helps low-income families afford rent, won't be going out to landlords this month. And immediately, the conversation turns to mass evictions, homelessness, chaos in the streets. But I need to talk about something that nobody else is discussing, something that's going to make some people uncomfortable, but it needs to be said. Let's start with the numbers, because numbers don't lie even when people do. There are 2.4 million households receiving Section 8 assistance in this country. When you break that down by race, here's what you get. 45% are Black or African American households. That's approximately 1,080,000 households. White non-Hispanic households make up 35%, about 840,000 households. Hispanic or Latino households of any race represent 16%, around 384,000 households. And other races, including Asian, Native American, and multiracial families, make up about 3%, roughly 72,000 households. Now, here's the part that's critical to understand. There are 43 million Black Americans in this country. If approximately 1 million Black households are on Section 8, we're talking about a very small minority of our community. And I need Black folks to hear this clearly. We will be all right if that program goes away. I'm not saying it won't hurt. I'm not saying those million households won't struggle. I'm saying that as a community of 43 million people, we are not defined by, dependent on, or destroyed by the existence or elimination of Section 8. This is about shifting the narrative. For too long, the conversation about programs like Section 8 has been framed as if Black people would collapse without them, as if we're the primary beneficiaries, as if our entire community's survival hinges on government assistance. That's a lie. That's a narrative designed to make us seem weak, dependent, incapable. And I'm here to tell you that narrative is propaganda, and we need to stop accepting it. When Section 8 payments don't go out in November, yes, there will be pain. Landlords will panic. Some will move to evict. Families will scramble. Courts will fill up with eviction cases. This is real. This is serious. But this is not a Black community crisis. This is an American crisis that affects multiple communities. And Black Americans represent less than half of the people impacted. Let me be clear about why I'm framing it this way, because every time there's a crisis involving social programs, Black faces get put on the news, Black families get interviewed, Black neighborhoods get filmed, and the underlying message, whether intentional or not, is that these programs are Black programs and that Black people can't survive without them. That messaging is harmful, it's inaccurate, and it needs to stop. The reality is that white households make up 35% of Section 8 recipients. That's 840,000 households. That's not insignificant. That's nearly as many as Black households. But you won't see that represented in the media coverage. You won't see rural white families being interviewed about potential evictions. You won't see white faces attached to this crisis in the way you'll see Black faces. And that's intentional because the narrative serves a purpose. It keeps Black Americans positioned as the dependent class while obscuring the fact that government assistance crosses all racial lines. Hispanic and Latino families represent 16% of Section 8 recipients. That's 384,000 households. Where's their representation in this conversation? Where's the acknowledgement that this crisis will devastate Latino communities? It's not there because the narrative doesn't want it there. The narrative wants one face on poverty, one face on government assistance, one face on dependency, and that face is supposed to be Black. I reject that narrative completely, and I'm asking Black Americans to reject it too. Now let's talk about what this Section 8 situation really represents. It represents a government that's willing to use housing as a weapon. It represents a system that can cut off assistance to 2.4 million households and call it policy. It represents the vulnerability that comes with depending on systems that don't have your best interests at heart. And this is why I'm focused specifically on what this means for Black Americans, not in coalition with other groups, but as our own distinct community with our own distinct interests. I know some people reading this are already uncomfortable. Why aren't you talking about coalition building? Why aren't you including other minority groups? Don't we need to work together? And my answer is simple. Minority coalitions don't work for Black Americans. They never have. Every time we've entered into minority coalitions, our specific issues get diluted, our specific needs get overlooked, our specific pain gets minimized in favor of a broader agenda that ultimately doesn't serve us. The data shows it. When we fight for minority rights, we end up at the bottom. When we fight for people of color justice, we end up with the least. When we build coalitions based on shared oppression, we discover that our oppression is deeper, older, more entrenched, and the coalition isn't equipped to address it specifically. So no, I'm not interested in coalition building right now. I'm interested in Black American survival and prosperity. Here's what Black Americans need to understand about this Section 8 situation. This is a test. This is the government testing how much pain they can inflict, how many programs they can cut, how far they can push before there's real resistance. And if we respond by panicking, by begging, by positioning ourselves as helpless victims who can't survive without their assistance, we lose. We lose power, we lose leverage, we lose respect. But if we respond by recognizing that 42 million of us are not on Section 8, that we've built businesses and wealth and communities with and without government programs, that we've survived slavery and Jim Crow and redlining and mass incarceration, and we're still here, still building, still rising, then we're operating from strength, not weakness. For the 1 million Black households on Section 8, here are your options, because you need to be thinking strategically right now, not emotionally. Option 1, immediate communication with landlords. Contact your landlord now. Explain the situation, negotiate. Some landlords will work with you because eviction is expensive and time-consuming for them too. They lose money during the eviction process. They lose money while the unit sits empty. A good landlord will recognize that keeping a reliable tenant who's temporarily affected by government dysfunction is smarter than starting over with a new tenant. Document everything. Get agreements in writing. Protect yourself legally. Option 2, community resource pooling. Connect with family, friends, church members, community organizations. Black Americans have always survived through collective support systems. When the government fails, which it often does, we fall back on each other. This is not shameful. This is strength. This is how we've made it this far. Pool resources, share spaces temporarily if needed. Create support networks that can help with rent gaps until Section 8 payments resume. Option 3, legal preparation. Understand your rights. Eviction is a legal process with specific requirements. Landlords can't just throw you out. There are timelines, notices, court proceedings. Know your local tenant laws. Connect with legal aid organizations. Many places have eviction defense programs. Be prepared to fight in court if necessary. Make them work for every eviction. Slow the process down. Buy yourself time. Option 4, strategic relocation. For some families, this might be the moment to consider moving somewhere more affordable, somewhere with family support, somewhere that doesn't depend on Section 8. This sounds drastic, but sometimes a crisis is the push needed to make changes that should have been made anyway. Evaluate your options. Don't let fear keep you trapped in a situation that's become untenable. The bottom line is this: Black Americans are resilient. We've faced worse. We've overcome more. Section 8 payments not going out in November is a crisis, but it's not our destruction. And I need us to stop allowing our community to be portrayed as helpless victims every time a government program gets cut. Let me talk about what's really happening here on a larger scale. The government is broke, or more accurately, the government has been spending irresponsibly, and now they're cutting programs to balance budgets that never should have been unbalanced in the first place. They gave tax cuts to billionaires and corporations. They funded endless wars. They bailed out banks. And now they're cutting Section 8, cutting SNAP, cutting everything that helps working class and poor people. This is by design. This is about priorities, and clearly we're not the priority. So what do we do with that information? Do we beg to be made a priority? Do we protest until they restore funding? Do we organize coalitions with other affected groups? Or do we recognize that a system that consistently deprioritizes us is not a system we should depend on? I'm advocating for the latter. I'm advocating for Black Americans to build systems that don't depend on government benevolence. I'm advocating for economic independence, for community-based support structures, for businesses that serve our community, for wealth building that happens within our community, for reducing our dependence on systems that have proven they don't care about our survival. This doesn't mean we don't fight for our rights. This doesn't mean we don't demand better from government, but it means we stop positioning ourselves as if we'll die without their help. Because historically, they've been trying to kill us with and without their help, and we're still here. That's power, that's resilience, that's something they can't take away no matter how many programs they cut. For Black Americans not on Section 8, this is still your issue. Because today it's Section 8, tomorrow it's something else. Today it's 1 million households, tomorrow it's a program you depend on. The instability of government assistance affects all of us eventually. So this is a moment to think about how we can support our community members who are affected while also building structures that make us less vulnerable to these kinds of attacks in the future. We need to be funding Black community organizations that can respond when government fails. We need to be building cooperative housing models that don't depend on Section 8. We need to be creating emergency funds within our communities that can help families facing eviction. We need to be thinking bigger than just surviving this particular crisis. We need to be thinking about how we build a future where government dysfunction doesn't threaten our housing stability. And we need to stop participating in narratives that make us look weak. When the news comes to interview people about Section 8 cuts, we need to be talking about government failure, not Black dependency. We need to be talking about systemic issues, not personal sob stories. We need to be framing this as an American problem with racist impacts, not a Black problem that affects other people too. The framing matters, the narrative matters, and we've let other people control our narrative for too long. I want to address the landlords directly for a moment, because some of you are reading this and thinking about evictions. Understand that mass evictions serve nobody. You lose money, you create instability in your properties, you destroy relationships with tenants who've been reliable until the government failed them. The smart business move is to negotiate, to work with your tenants, to recognize that this is a temporary government failure, not a tenant failure. Some of you will ignore this advice and move forward with evictions anyway. Just know that you're contributing to a crisis that will come back to hurt you too. The question of whether Section 8 payment delays will bring mass evictions depends entirely on how landlords respond and how tenants prepare. If tenants panic and landlords exploit, yes, we'll see mass evictions. But if tenants organize, communicate, and assert their rights, and if landlords recognize the economic stupidity of mass evictions, we can minimize the damage. For Black Americans specifically, we need to approach this with the same mindset that got us through every other crisis. Faith, family, and community. We need to support our people who are affected. We need to share resources. We need to provide legal help. We need to open our homes if necessary. And we need to do this while maintaining our dignity and refusing to be portrayed as helpless. This is not about being callous to the 1 million Black households on Section 8. This is about refusing to let 1 million households define 43 million people. This is about recognizing that we're bigger than any single program, stronger than any single crisis, and more capable than the narratives suggest. Section 8, payments not going out in November, is painful, it's stressful, it's unjust, but it's not our end. It's not even close. And the sooner we internalize that, the sooner we stop reacting from a place of fear and start operating from a place of power, the better off we'll be. We've survived worse. We'll survive this, and we'll come out the other side stronger, more independent, and less willing to depend on systems that have never truly had our backs. That's not pessimism, that's realism. And that's the mindset that will carry us through not just this crisis, but every crisis they throw at us next.